Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast for Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. My name is Justin Young, and joining me, as always, are OJ Duncan and Ryan Freels. Hey guys, how are y'all doing?
Doing well. I've had a good week, but this heat is just brutal.
I think that's pretty much true everywhere right now. Yeah. I don't know if there's any place in the world right now that's not under just heat advisory. Yeah. You saw like London is having record heat. Like they've hit temperatures they've never hit before.
Yeah, and nobody has an air conditioning there. So
right.
Yeah. Honestly, same. Getting some work done, playing some video games, and but there's that part of me that wants to go outside sometimes. But anytime I step outside, I'm like, forget this.
Yeah, it's been pretty hot and just overbearing and everything. Anything new, exciting going on?
Aside from just cowering inside, I'm teaching some classes over the summer. I'm really enjoying them. I have a lot of really great students.
Yeah, you're teaching that sort of entryway to college program, right?
Yeah, so it's called the Future Scholars Program, and it's students who like just didn't make it with test scores or GPAs to get into college. So they have their entire summer covered. They're taking 3 classes: English 101, Public Speaking 101, and University 101. And they have a really structured day. They get all of their food is taken care of. The SIU Foundation pays for all of their tuition, room and board. And so they have time to like get used to college and see if it's something that they'll be able to do. And usually they come out with a lot more structured way of going about schooling than they did in high school, which is something I would have loved to have when I was an undergrad. So I really appreciate the program and what it's doing for the students. And a lot of the students are very motivated and appreciative that they're getting this chance.
Yeah, I know when I was in high school, I took several AP classes in high school. So I took AP English, I took AP U.S. History, and particularly the AP U.S. History class was fantastic for me because that teacher, Mr. Baker, he was like just brutally hard on students. And you had to take notes. And then you had to study. And so like a group of us in that class would get together and study for the exams and everything. And it just taught me how to take notes, how to study for a test, which I was a pretty good student in school. So I didn't have those skills really very developed. And that class taught them to me. And then when I went to college, I was like, oh, well, that class is what most of college is like. And I would not have had those skills without his class. And I try to keep that in mind now when I'm dealing with students that a lot of them are coming from not that background. They're coming from a background where they've never had somebody teach them those skills or force them into learning those skills like Mr. Baker did. And so, yeah, I think anything that helps develop those skills very early on in college can only be beneficial to students.
Definitely, yeah. And this is the second year we're doing the program. There's students from the first year who are mentoring the students now the second year, and just walking them through to making sure they're staying on schedule, making sure they're using their study hours and stuff. It's such a fantastic program.
Great. And Ryan, have you started Miss Marvel yet?
I have. I'm not like all the way through it yet, but I've watched the first 2 episodes. I haven't seen it all yet, so I can't say for sure, but I'm expecting this to be like up there with Moon Knight. Moon Knight's my favorite currently, and this I feel like it's going to be right up there. And I have a feeling Moon Knight might still be my favorite in some senses, but I have a feeling this is going to be the better show overall.
Yeah, Alicia, who is, of course, not here again because she's just completely slacking off. She's out searching for her love of her life, Sonic the Hedgehog.
And doing a worldwide tour, updating controllers.
Yeah. It's, she's really at this point hitting, like, I think, Southeast Asia, making sure all their controllers are updated.
We need our hobbies.
But I know she was saying it's right up there for her alongside WandaVision, and maybe it was Hawkeye was the other one that she really liked. So we are in contact with Alicia. We do know that she's still alive. Yeah. She may not be on the podcast right now, but we are in touch with her.
She's outside the door just watching Sonic videos on her phone.
She can't take a break for an hour to record with us. So. She should be back, however, for future episodes. Fingers crossed. Yeah. All right, let's get into the news because we actually, always, we have a lot of news to cover and everything. First, I thought this was kind of interesting. Nintendo of Japan has announced that they will recognize same-sex marriages among their employees, even though Japan itself as a nation does not. So this is, Nintendo, if you haven't noticed, tends to be a fairly conservative company, and maybe not conservative politically, but conservative, sort of old-fashioned, doing things in a very old-fashioned way. So this is a pretty big stance for them to take. It probably has a lot to do with trying to mirror the policies that they would have with other branches of Nintendo, so like Nintendo of America, for example. But still, this seems like an obviously positive good coming out of Nintendo, and it can only help with other companies potentially following suit.
Yeah, because Japan still does have problems in terms of how it treats the LGBTQ community. I don't think it generally has say the same history of violence that America has had, but there's still severe problems not recognizing same-sex marriage for one, and trans folks in order to be recognized as the genders that they are, they have to be sterilized. So Japan still has some severe issues to work on, so seeing Nintendo do this is it's nice.
Yeah, and you've talked about how some Japanese games still play up trans characters as the butt of a joke and everything, which is you don't see as much in American games these days. I'm not even sure I can think of an example offhand where that did happen in an American game, but let's say American media more broadly, at least. You don't see that as much. But yeah, in Japanese games, you still do see that some. So it is certainly a cultural difference. Let's see. PlayStation has announced their new rewards program called PlayStation Stars. That'll be launching later this year. So they announced as part of this that you will be able to earn digital collectibles. And they were very quick to point out and very explicitly pointed out that these are not NFTs. These have nothing to do with the blockchain. These are just going to be collectibles that you earn, and I have no idea what you can do with them once you've earned them. Maybe display them on your profile page. Who knows?
So they're NFTs? I'm joking.
They are what NFTs spend a whole lot more energy and resources doing for no added benefit.
Right. This is the cute little fun version.
Right. Yeah. So you're going to be able to complete tasks, or as they phrase them, campaigns. These can be things like winning tournaments or achieving specific trophies within games. One of the things that they mentioned was maybe the first player to platinum some new big blockbuster title, so something like your Ghost of Sushima or something like that. Okay. When that would come out, if you were the first one to platinum that within your local time zone or local region. So that wasn't entirely clear if they were saying hey, everyone in the central time zone, whoever is the first person to do this, or if it would be the U.S. region, or, and maybe they're not entirely sure of that yet. But you would be able to earn these rewards, earn discounts potentially on game purchases, earn these digital collectibles, several different things.
Okay, that's cool.
I don't know. Does this interest you? Does this make you potentially... Do these rewards sound like things that might make you play more games or play games to the point of completion more often and everything, so that you can get specific rewards, specific discounts, and that sort of thing?
It might for me. I've always been a completionist, and so I always want to platinum every game that I play if I can. And for some of them, I probably would have been competitive Like Infamous Second Son, I bought it and got platinum trophy like real soon. So I was probably one of the first people that got, maybe not one of the first people, but at least in this area, I was probably one of the first people who got the platinum. Just because I did it so quickly. But then I don't have that much time anymore, so I probably wouldn't be able to like be the first to platinum. But playing through campaigns or tournaments and winning trophies, that's gamification. Or I do that to help students learn. So
Right.
I would do that here. They would get me.
I might do it for games that I'm like just. I don't think I'd do it for every game I played, but maybe just very specific games that I'm super interested in for whatever reason. So, I could see it being something I do every now and again. It wouldn't be something I'd like be super invested into. I wouldn't be like, oh, I got this reward and this reward and this reward.
Right.
It just depends.
Yeah, I can see it maybe motivating me to play a specific game on the PlayStation versus the Xbox, or it might motivate me, as OJ said, to like finish a game. You know, like achievements and the trophy system already on the PlayStation. They do that to some extent, depending on the amount of work it's going to be. So, like I know with Marvel Spider-Man, I did platinum that game. But I platinumed it basically because I'd already beat it and I was to the end and there was like 4 things I had to do to get the platinum, right? So that was enough motivation to get me to go ahead and platinum it. But there's a whole lot of games I finish and I'm like, I don't care about getting the platinum on this. It doesn't seem worth it to me. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how this turns out and everything. I don't think the digital collectibles hold a whole lot of value to me. You know, if you're going to give me a picture of Cole from the Infamous games, like, cool, I guess. Yeah. But, like, you know, I don't know what that translates into actual value.
Right.
You know, is it going to be a screen, you know, like a background for my cell phone? You know, okay, that's kind of cool, I guess. And if it was my favorite game, maybe I would use that. But it's just a picture I can look at on some online site. I don't know that I care.
Right.
Let's see. Nintendo has acquired Dynamo Pictures out of Japan and has announced that they will be renaming them Nintendo Pictures. So Dynamo Pictures is an animation company. They have worked on things like Evangelion 2.0, which I am not familiar with, but Ryan, I bet you are.
So I'm familiar with the original series. I saw the first Evangelion movie of like the rebuild series that this is a part of, and I wasn't happy with it.
Okay.
I've been meaning to go back and give it a chance, but yeah, I'm in general, yes, I'm very familiar with Evangelion.
They also worked on Death Stranding, the PlayStation game. They did some of the, I'm assuming, the cutscenes in that. They also worked on some short films featuring the Pikmin characters, the Nintendo Pikmin characters. So this is probably why Nintendo has a relationship and everything with them. It's not been entirely clear what they plan to do with this. So, you know, obviously they've worked on some video games, but they've also worked on some TV shows and movies and different things. Nintendo said that this will be a way to leverage their intellectual property. The fact that they renamed it Nintendo Pictures makes me think it's not going to be just working on games.
Yeah.
It makes me think that Nintendo wants that name, Nintendo Pictures, to actually appear on products. And so that makes me feel like this is going to be TV shows, movies, animated TV shows. You know, we're obviously getting the Mario movie with Chris Pratt. And I don't know if this is in response to that, like a negative response, or if it's even a positive response of, hey, we can't rely on Universal to do all of this work for us. Let's go out and start doing our own animated work, right? For the things that maybe the big movie studios aren't coming knocking for, right? And I don't know what all that would be, but I can imagine a Fire Emblem TV series or something of that nature. And probably Universal Studios has no interest in that. So what do you think? Or maybe even what would you want to see out of this?
I could kind of see it going in the direction of maybe, hey, we'll let America produce their versions of things, but we'll also produce our own stuff over here. Because that wouldn't be too dissimilar to how Godzilla got handled, because Godzilla's being produced over here by America. Like, I think it was Universal, right? Also? Was it Universal?
It's Warner Brothers now, and it was Sony
it was-
back in the 90s.
Okay,
Matthew
it's Warner
Broderick's
Brothers
film
now.
is Sony.
That's right, Warner Brothers, not Universal. But even then, even after the first Godzilla movie, I think then Japan still made another, like Toho still made another one over there,
Yeah.
Shin Godzilla. So, coincidentally, directed by the creator of the Evangelion movies and the Evangelion series. But not nerding out there. Just the point is that I could see them just like, all right, we'll have like the American versions of stuff being produced for audiences that might be more interested in that, while we'll go ahead and keep up producing like our own stuff over here.
Yeah, I mean, I can see Nintendo trying to figure out, okay, how do we take these properties and how do we really start turning them into additional ways to bring in money? How do we take Zelda and sell that off to Netflix? And the story is that at one point they were working with Netflix to do a Zelda series, and then Nintendo got cold feet at the last minute and backed out of that deal after news of it leaked. And so I wonder if this is them saying, okay, well, we want to do a Zelda series. We want to sell that to streaming because that'll bring us in a lot of money and it also promote our games, but we want to be in complete control. And this gives us that opportunity to be in complete control when we do that. And that seems like something Nintendo, after their experience with the original Super Mario Brothers film, they've been much more hands-on with this Universal film that's coming out, or Illumination animation that they're doing. They've been much more hands-on and saying, hey, we're going to meet with you. We're going to have a say in how this film gets produced. So it'll be interesting to see. So maybe a lot more, movies and TV shows coming from Nintendo soon.
Go ahead, OJ.
I was gonna say I'd take a Metroid show. I'd take a Zelda show. I'd take a lot of shows from Nintendo properties.
And both of those just seem so poised for it, right? Like a Zelda show where it's Link and Zelda and those characters going off on, a new adventure each episode, or even a continuing adventure over the entire season. And Metroid the same way as a bounty hunter, right? It's set up to be serialized.
You know what I would love to see with Zelda? I would love to see an explanation of the timeline because there's so many fan theories about it and how it's happening. I would love to see it actually explained and given shape.
Well, they do in one of the books.
Okay.
And was it
The Compendium or something? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's like one of the books. I think it's the one I have actually. It actually goes through and explains the timeline, but it explains it by saying that the timeline split, and so there's actually two forks of the timeline, and it's not a 100% great explanation. There's still lots of questions, but it is the closest Nintendo has come to like actually explaining what's going on in the Zelda game. Because Zelda's so weird. Zelda's like, it's almost like Final Fantasy in that each one completely stands on its own. But then occasionally they'll kind of link them together.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, well, remember when the world flooded? And you're like, wait, are you doing like some sort of Noah biblical reference, or are you referring to the Wind Waker here?
Yeah.
They need to get Sam Raimi over there to do a multiverse of madness for Zelda.
That would be pretty cool with the different art styles they've done over the years.
Actually, Raimi probably wouldn't be a bad director for a Zelda movie.
No, he would probably have a lot of fun with it. I'm not sure if they would like some of the things he would do with it, but at least it would be properly scary in parts, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The
Zelda with
hands
jump
that
scares.
come out of the walls and grab you. I forget their names, but those are great enemies. Let's see. The new Skate game that was announced a year or two ago, they've announced that is going to be free to play. So this will be, just a game you can download, you can play. They are going to augment that with, you guessed it, microtransactions. But I will say, when it comes to microtransactions for a game like Skate, so much of skating culture, well, the skating culture I grew up around, I'll say, was so much about like fashion, right? Like it was about like the design of your board. It was about your clothes, and like that carried over so much into OJ. I'm sure you remember quite well the '90s, the Vans shoes and all of that carried over even into mainstream fashion, or if you were in high school in the '90s. And so I just see the possibility of like Vans putting their products into this game and saying, hey, it's $2 if you want this pair of shoes, and then in a month releasing a new pair of shoes and saying, hey, this is like Malibu Stacy got a new hat. Don't you want these new shoes? And so, again, you don't have to do any of that. But of course, if you're playing it a lot and you're hanging out with your friends in the way real skaters would, you would kind of want to be able to show off.
Yeah, definitely stickers on boards. They could sell a sticker for $1 each, and people would probably pay for them.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that could be branded content where they're kind of double dipping. A lot of those companies I can imagine saying, "Hey, like we want to advertise our products within this game," and they're like, "Sure," and we're also going to take a cut of that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. You see a lot more games going to free to play like this. And there's obviously some negatives to that, but then you look at a game like Skate, and I don't know if Skate makes sense as a franchise, something that you're going to be able to annualize or every 2 years put out a new $60, $70 Skate product. Is there enough of a fan base for that? The people who are fans of Skate 3 have been playing that game now for like 10 years. Like, are they going to go and buy a new one every year or two? And that's eventually what killed the Tony Hawk franchise, is that people got tired of buying a new one every year. So this seems like maybe a smart way to take that. We already mentioned Ghost of Sushima, but it has been reported it sold 9.7 million copies. So that's a pretty crazy amount for a brand new IP. This is not a sequel to anything, an entirely new entry. This is why we are not getting a new Sly Cooper or a new Infamous game, because they did not sell 10 million copies, and they are going to take this and keep sequelizing it until it stops selling 10 million copies.
See, I think if they made another Infamous game, it would hit pretty high, because there were so many huge fans of it when they were coming out normally, and now we have a new generation that really loves the game too. So a lot of people love the Infamous games, so they might get a big one just from that.
I agree with you. I love those games. I even love Second Son, which is, I know, kind of considered the least of the three and everything, but I love all of them. But I wonder, in this day and age, with as big as Marvel and DC are with their films, do you think selling a superhero video game that doesn't have a licensed property attached to it, like, is that game going to sell 10 million copies when Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine are going to be out in the next 3 or 4 years?
I think Infamous might, but I don't think an entirely brand new one would. But I really honestly think Infamous would, specifically. That might just be my own bias, but I know that there's a lot of new people have started playing it since it came out.
Yeah. I mean, I still hope that they'll remaster those games and put them out, since the first two were PlayStation 3 games, right?
Yeah.
They're very difficult to play now. Yeah. Let's see. The Sonic Origins team is working on a patch. So after getting called out by the development team that worked on those, one of the developers at least, after getting called out by Yuji Naka, as we talked about last week, they have announced they are working on a patch to fix the problems that people have with those games. I don't know that it will fix the musical issues, because that sounds like a legal issue, but it will at least maybe fix some of the other issues. So if you've been holding off on buying Sonic Origins, it might be worth waiting and seeing how that patch turns out. Nintendo has announced that more games are coming for the N64 on Nintendo Switch Online after Pokimane Puzzle League. So that was the last game that they released. That was the last game they had pre-announced. So they'd already announced that game was coming eventually to Nintendo Switch Online. When it came out, it was the last of the pre-announced games. And they felt the need to get out there and say, hey, we're still doing more. We're not giving up on this yet. But, of course, it's been a slow trickle. I think a lot of people are very disappointed with the Nintendo Switch Online and the N64 in particular. It hasn't rolled out. It doesn't feel like nearly as fast with nearly as many games as the NES and Super NES did on there. I don't know. What are there games that you still really want to see on Nintendo Switch Online that aren't on there yet?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know the whole lineup that's on it yet. But let's see. 64. Conker's Bad Fur Day. Is that up?
No.
No,
Okay.
That's not on there.
See, I would like to see Conker's Bad Fur Day and play that again.
How about you, Ryan?
It was kind of like the redheaded stepchild amongst like Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, but I wouldn't mind playing like Donkey Kong 64 again if they'd put that one up there.
I think that's been one people have been requesting quite a bit.
Yeah, and I guess the other one I wouldn't mind it, and just because I missed the chance to play it when it was out, it was like one of those big deal games that I never played when I was younger. It'd be cool if GoldenEye was on there and I could play that and try that out.
So supposedly that Nintendo and Microsoft are working on that.
Okay.
And the rumor is that they've had it done and ready to go, so that they're doing a remaster for the Xbox, and that when that comes out as part of that deal, because both Nintendo and Microsoft, because Microsoft owns Rare now,
Right.
have some rights tied up in this entire mess, but that they were ready to release that this spring, and that game is full of Russian military imagery. And so that they have been sitting on that game because of the war in Ukraine. And that's why it has not gotten released yet.
Okay, that's understandable. I didn't think about that.
So achievements actually leaked out of the Xbox remaster, or whatever they're calling it. Achievements have actually leaked out. So people are pretty positive it's coming out at some point. The question has been, well, if it's already got achievements online and everything, why is this not happening? And the prevailing wisdom is that it's because of the war in Ukraine, which when you look at Nintendo, who makes the least violent video games, everything's about cute, cuddly animals and that sort of thing. And then you look,
each other up.
well, yes, cute, cuddly animals fighting each other for our amusement. But it's weird to look at them, and that's two games now potentially that they've had to sit on, because the other one being the Advance Wars remake that they are potentially sitting on right now due to the war in Ukraine. Now, they haven't said that's the reason for either of those, but they did delay the release of the Advance Wars remake from this spring, and that's the same rumor for GoldenEye. So, let's not be small-minded here. There are much bigger issues with the war in Ukraine than two video games.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see, how far-reaching, global politics can be in everything that they affect. The UK has called for regulation of loot boxes. This feels maybe a couple of years a little late.
Yeah.
As the game industry has kind of started doing better with this themselves, but still it's interesting to hear this. Some work of this has already been done by some European nations. It's been talked about here in the U.S., but it'll be interesting to see if anything actually comes of this.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, I've spent a decent amount of money on loot boxes in different games, and so Final Fantasy Record Keeper, which I think is actually at the end of its life now too. But I was playing that.
I don't even know what that game is.
So it's kind of like all it has people from all of the Final Fantasy games, like
Is this mobile?
yeah.
Okay.
And so you're like a character that's a record keeper, and all the records got mixed up. So you have to go through all of these levels and fight, and it's very like 16-bit type thing. And so you get characters from all of the games in these 16-bit style, and it's really nice. And they even had Final Fantasy 15 characters, but then they would have loot boxes for like their special weapons and special armor and stuff. And then so you would get a loot box, and it would be like. They were expensive loot boxes too. They weren't like, oh, you could get 10 pulls for $1. It was like $30 for 10 pulls. But then like I really like
pretty pricey.
Yeah. And like I really like Gladiolus. And so like when his weapons came out, I was like, oh well, I'm gonna spend 30 here and try to do a 10 pull. Oh, it's not guaranteed. I didn't get it. Well, maybe I'll spend 30 more. Just, I haven't bought any other games in a couple weeks or a couple months, so I'll spend it. And then like other favorites that I have, like Renoa, Terra and Celeste and stuff, I would be tempted to sell this money. And so if I could buy it for a certain amount of money, I would be more likely to spend money in certain games rather than having, or if I knew I had a good chance of getting it, I would spend money. But like these like 0.001% chance of getting it stuff is good for getting the whales to spend money, right? But not for the average person.
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy loot boxes only because I know it's a dangerous path for me to go down.
Yeah, it is. I don't do it anymore, but
and I just have to stop myself because I know I would very easily fall into that. Oh, it's only $20. Mm-hmm. I haven't bought any games lately. $20 is not much money, which it isn't. But $20 doing that every week all of a sudden adds up really quick. Right. You're spending a lot on one game. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that did come good out of some of this regulation, including some of the regulation that China did on loot boxes, was including like the odds of pulling things out of particular games. And some of that's carried over into, the game releases in the U.S. and around the world. So that's been at least a positive thing, I think. Sony has acquired Repeat.gg, which is an esports company. Lets you host your own game tournaments and everything. I didn't actually have time to look into this, so I don't really know a whole lot about them. I thought this was interesting because Sony earlier acquired Evo, the fighting game tournament company, and it seems like Sony, what started out kind of quietly, has really turned into leaning pretty heavy into esports and wanting to be a major player in that. I mean, anytime you buy Evo, the biggest fighting game tournament, you instantly become a big player, I feel like, in esports. But acquiring this other company seems like this is maybe not a one-off, that they want to be bigger in this arena. And to give Sony some credit here, Sony has, I feel like, been very like coy in that like Sony doesn't have their own streaming service. And so they've been selling off their properties to, Netflix and Amazon, and, everybody gets something. And people have been like, oh, well, this is kind of dumb of Sony. But in the meantime, Sony has basically wrapped up all the anime in the world. And like, with, I guess it's Crunchyroll now. And like, they have bought up all the other anime services. And you look at it and you go, okay, that's a pretty big niche market that Sony just controls now.
Yeah.
And I guess if you want to watch anime, like that's your one way to watch anime at this point. I mean, I know there's some original stuff that Netflix has, but it's pretty limited, is my understanding. So, this seems like Sony being kind of clever and like, hey, we're going to, as quietly as we can, try to rack up control of the esports market. And we'll see how that pays off for them. Bayonetta 3 has got a release date for October 28th of this year. Bayonetta 3, which was announced like 5 years ago, like nobody knew if it was actually ever going to come out. So them getting a firm release date, October, right before Halloween, is pretty exciting. Have either of you played the other Bayonetta games?
I love Bayonetta. I love the character Bayonetta. I love the gameplay of Bayonetta. It's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this. Unfortunately, I'm still gonna be in prelims when it comes out, but this will be my treat to myself after prelims. I think is gonna be Bayonetta 3.
I played a little bit of the first one. I've been meaning to like go back to those ones because I remembered it was really cool. I definitely liked like the designs for the enemies and stuff, like the aesthetic of those games and like the monsters and stuff was really cool.
Yeah, it's just a fun action character game, right? Like it's cool, it's fun, you feel good playing it, you feel cool playing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those games that gets that balance just right and everything. And so those are fantastic games. Bayonetta 1 is available on just about everything. Bayonetta 2 is a Nintendo exclusive, so I don't see that coming to anything anytime soon. And Bayonetta 3 is also going to be a Nintendo exclusive. So, it looks like the Switch version is the only version you're going to get for a while, at least until the Switch 2 comes out. Speaking of new Nintendo games, this was really kind of a surprise. They just put out a trailer and announced Kirby's Dream Buffet. And this game looks just utterly charming. It has multiple Kirbys racing across dessert-themed levels. So the beginning of the trailer is you are Kirby eyeing a cake that you're very excited to eat because what does Kirby do? He eats everything, and then you get shrunk down and you're rolling around through the frosting on the cake. And then that's the game, apparently, and you have to consume strawberries. And it's not clear what the actual gameplay is. It does look like you are racing the other Kirbys, which are all different colored versions of Kirby. But like, what's not as clear with it is what is the sort of race style? Like, is this where you're just trying to see who collects the most strawberries? A lot of people have said it looks very Fall Guys like in the gameplay and everything that's shown in the trailer. And they haven't released any more details other than it's coming this summer. So I don't know if you've had a chance to see the trailer and how you feel about that.
I haven't seen the trailer, but I'm going to buy this after Kirby and the Forgotten World. Is it Forgotten World or Forgotten Land? I'm gonna just buy every Kirby thing after this. It was that game was just so good that I'm gonna buy everything they have.
So it did its job. It won you over to Kirby.
It did.
I haven't looked at this trailer yet. I'm interested though. Maybe we'll finally get to see Ryu eat Kirby.
At the very end, you win the race, and Ryu just reaches down, grabs the cake, and eats it.
I'm hungry.
I've got to keep up my huge size now.
Yeah, that's how he got so huge.
It's just
eating Kirby cake.
It does look really charming, and it does look like what a lot of Nintendo games are now, multiplayer sort of couch co-op play and everything, couch competitive play, so could be really exciting. Let's see. You can get Stray, the new cat-themed game from Annapurna Software, Annapurna Interactive, I guess is their actual name. You can get that for free this week because it is now part of one of the PlayStation Plus tiers. I forget the name of all the different tiers. Essentials is the lowest tier, and then I think there's Plus and Extra. The naming of those tiers is just stupid. You have 3 tiers. They should have named them Bronze, Silver, and Gold. Yeah, that would have been so much easier for people to remember.
They went the Starbucks route.
Yeah, Grande.
Yeah, Grande, Tall, and Venti.
But anyways, they are offering a free 7-day trial, so you can actually get onto one of those premium tiers, download and play Stray. It's only about 5 hours long. That game has been getting fantastic reviews. I am very excited to play that game. It's a game about where you play as a cat, and like how often outside of Garfield games do you get that opportunity?
I'm going to play this weekend.
So yeah, I'm excited to try that and everything. So you can go to the PlayStation Plus page, and it does make sure that it does say that there's a 7-day free trial. I did check it last night, but who knows how long that'll last. Let's see. It costs $255 to unlock everything in Multiverses. Multiverses is the new Warner Brothers themed Super Smash Brothers clone. So it's got Superman and Shaggy and Scooby Doo and characters from Game of Thrones, excuse me. All those sorts of Warner Brother properties.
Bugs Bunny,
Bugs Bunny.
Steven Universe characters, a couple of them.
Yeah, and so the game is free to play, but it is apparently $255 to unlock everything, which is apparently different skins and everything for the different characters. Mostly just reporting that because I think it's kind of interesting. That could have went a much darker route. It could have been the Diablo route of you're spending thousands of dollars in order to unlock this stuff. So $255 seems more reasonable, but way too much for anyone. I think probably legitimately to invest into that game.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to try this one just because it has Steven Universe characters in it, and I'm a big fan of that show. And there is something wild about having the strange mix of, you can be Batman, you can also be Arya from Game of Thrones, or you can be Bugs Bunny.
Right.
But there's no way in hell I'm paying $255 on it.
Right. I mean, to see Arya Stark fighting Steven Universe, I think I would pay a good amount of money to see that.
Okay, that's true.
But yeah, so also this 255 when you mentioned Diablo Immortal. Before Diablo Immortal, I'd be like, I'm not going to spend $255 for skins and stuff. But then after seeing people spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on that, I'm like, $255 is not anything at all. So maybe Diablo Immortal did its job. And
well, I think
desensitized.
I think too, when you consider it's a free-to-play game, so you knock $60 off of that, you're down to $190. That's still too much money to spend. But if you are thinking of it as a free-to-play game, you could spend $60 and not feel terrible spending $60 on that game.
Yeah.
So if you Ryan, you're a big fan of Steven Universe. If you want to get this 2 or 3 skins for that character in the game or those characters within the game, you could do that and spend $10 and not feel like you're getting ripped off since it's already free to play. So, it's a lot of money, but it's also reasonable when you consider most people aren't going to buy everything within that.
That's true.
Doom designer John Romero, who very famously was going to make you his bitch. That was the Daikatana advertising slogan.
And we all saw how that went.
Yeah, so but John Romero seems like a cool guy now. He's very kind of laid back, and but he is working on a new first-person shooter using the Unreal 5 engine. So he's announced this. His team is staffing up and everything. This is kind of exciting when you think that one of the people who gave birth to Doom is going to make a brand new first-person shooter. Let's hope it's more Doom than Daikatana, but even that game was ambitious at the time.
It's kind of sad too because that game felt like it had some cool ideas going on. Just it did not take off.
I think it was ambitious beyond what it could handle at the time, right? And it's one of those games you think had they made that game 5 years later, it might have been a very different story. Let's see. Is it pronounced Pokimane? Do either of you know?
I don't know.
I presume so. I don't know.
So Pokimane is a streamer, Twitch streamer. Her videos also go up onto YouTube. I have seen her before in some videos and stuff, but I can't say that I'm much of a follower or fan of hers. But she is one of the big names known in the industry. She's right up there alongside, some of those bigger names that you would maybe be familiar with and everything, like PewDiePie and Ninja and, those sorts of types. She has something like 9 million people following her on Twitch. So, big profile and everything on there. She's announced that she is taking a break from streaming for, quote, a mental health reset. And the reason I'm reporting this, again, I'm not a big Pokimane fan, but I think it's kind of interesting with her. I think the conventional wisdom, and you hear this a lot, people going, that guy is making a living playing video games. every day plays video games online. And yes, that does sound like a wonderful like career and everything. But I thought it was interesting. Her average streaming, and this comes from a Polygon story, Polygon.com story about this. They looked at her average streaming hours on Twitch. She was averaging 77 hours per week.
Poor thing.
And some weeks going over 100 hours. So, you know, when we talk about a 40-hour work week, she's doing 77 hours a week. And then that's just streaming, right? That's just hours of her producing content, streaming live and everything. That's to say nothing of her having to update her Twitch profile, update, you know, upload these videos onto YouTube, like manage her business account and everything else that comes with what she does for this. That's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And if you think of her sort of as an entrepreneur, then it makes a little bit more sense. You know, entrepreneurs often have to put in a huge number of hours, but, you know, I think it starts to make sense when you start looking at those numbers, why somebody might get to a point where they're like, hey, I don't need to take a day off. I need to take extended time off from doing this.
Right. Because she's not going, like, it was like she's playing video games just for money. Like, she's not going to always be wanting to do what she's doing. She's doing that because she needs to for her job, like, to a point. Like, she's going to have other things she wants to do, and it's going to be just become work at some point. So, good for her for taking a break.
Yeah, I know there was a leak of info from Twitch that happened a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago. And as part of that, some of how much money streamers were making came out of that. And the thing that I thought was particularly interesting is they looked at that data. And one of the things that people realized was most streamers, even some of the ones that had a pretty big following, and you think, well, they're doing this professionally, they're doing this full time as a job and everything, we're basically making below minimum wage per hour. And I think that's the myth. Like everybody looks at the 3 or 4 people, they look at a PewDiePie or somebody of that nature and they go, wow, that person's making a ton of money playing video games. The vast majority of people on Twitch are not making anywhere near that. And they're not even making minimum wage. They would be better off going and working at McDonald's. And it's easy for people to say, well, yeah, but playing video games is a lot easier than working at McDonald's. True. But also, you know, you're generally not working 100 hours at McDonald's. And if you like take a day off or you take a week off, McDonald's isn't saying, hey, well, we're taking all your money away, which is kind of what happens to a lot of these people. They lose so many of their fans, they can't afford to take a week vacation off.
And there's the stress of keeping all those fans happy, and whatever conflict you have with those fans. Like, I can't remember the name of the particular streamer, but I remember watching something about a streamer who basically had to do that to make for a living. And he had to do it even though he was constantly, you know, he was also kind of a joke to a lot of his fans that were kind of making fun of and ridiculing him. So he was kind of had to as a living. Because of various disability issues, there wasn't much else he could do.
Right.
He basically had to just keep pleasing people that were making fun of him for money.
Yeah, and Pokimane, I think, I don't know if we've called this out specifically, but we did use the she pronoun. Pokimane is a woman, and we know that women get it especially worse online.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And, you know, and she has been the focus of a lot of, and that's probably where I became aware of her. She was the focus of a lot of really negative rhetoric online directed at her, hostility directed at her. You know, a lot of people saying, oh, you don't really care about video games. You know, the only reason you're successful is because you're an attractive woman doing this. And, you know, that brings in a whole psychological level that, you know, all three of us teach. We don't really deal with that. You know, like nobody, for the most part, heckles me while I'm teaching. You know, I have to have a really bad class and doing a bad job for someone to heckle me literally while I'm in the middle of teaching. But for a lot of these streamers, that is what they're dealing with. You know, particularly the women get it worse. And, you know, it's not as easy of a job, I think, as it often appears from the outside. And I think this is yet another example of that. Her saying, "I need a mental health reset," I think is, pretty good evidence of that.
I couldn't do it. With my ADHD, I wouldn't be able to keep up with, like, focusing on doing the same thing that long. And also, just as, like, a very introverted, shy person, I like to socialize, but I also need a lot of me time. The idea of trying to interact with a fan base that often is just...
Yeah. I understand. I don't know that's a job I could do full time. Let's see. Xbox is getting Discord voice support. This came out just today. My understanding is that it's coming out on an update on Xbox today. So this is pretty cool. These systems used to be very closed off, and the fact that they're bringing in support for things like Discord and everything so that you can, so many people, that's where their friends who play games organize through. And this just seems potentially to make that much simpler, much more straightforward, and avoid having to deal with multiple different friends list. Unity is merging with IronSource. So IronSource is a maker of, they basically do metrics for mobile products, but that's what they do now. They're most famous and most noted, have been most noted. Wow, my voice is going out. Have been
really choking up over this.
Yeah, I'm really upset. Have been most noted in recent history for the fact that they basically made malware that got installed onto people's computers and tried to install additional software. So if you've ever tried to install software on your computer and it's like, hey, do you want to install this this helper bar into your web browser? And do you want to install this additional software that is going to serve you ads for a reason you don't really understand at all? That's the sort of software, my understanding, is what they were making. Their software actually got flagged by Windows, what was it called now? Windows Defender, their antivirus, as malware. And so basically Windows would be like, hey, no, don't install this. So they are merging with Unity, who makes one of the two biggest game engines in the world, right alongside Unreal. If you play a variety of different games, you're almost certainly playing some games that run off of Unity. I know at least one of the games I'm going to be talking about this week runs off of Unity. So that has a lot of Unity developers upset because they say, well, where are you going with this? What are you going to do with this? Are you going to try to install malware into every Unity game that comes out? They have said that's not what they're doing. They said they also don't make that software anymore, that they focus on mobile products and everything now. So, we'll see. However, they made this purchase. They also purchased or made this merger. Unity also very recently purchased Weta Digital, which comes from Weta Visual Effects, who worked on the Lord of the Rings films and all that.
We're going to work on Evangelion live-action movies, since that's been a theme this episode, kind of. Just thought I'd bring that up, that those movies got canceled or in development hell or something. So.
Oh, well, as most products end up. But yeah, that's really interesting that they were part of that as well. And then Unity had an all sort of employee meeting where the CEO, John Riccatelli, got up and said, hey, we're making these purchases. We don't think there's anything that's going to be problematic about us in the near future. And then 2 weeks later, laid off several hundred employees.
Ugh.
Then, in an interview this last week, he said that some game developers are, quote, some of the biggest fucking idiots, unquote. And this was in reference to the fact that they were not building their games from the ground up with microtransactions in mind. John Riccatelli, if that name sounds familiar, he used to be the CEO of, can you guess?
Blizzard? Activision?
No, that's a very good guess.
That's what I was thinking too.
It's the other terrible one, Electronic Arts.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I knew they knew the name from somewhere.
So he has come out and apologized and said his comments were taken out of context. At first, he said that the article was just clickbait, and people were like, "No, man, you said it."
Yeah.
And he said, then he had to come back and actually apologize. And he tried to apologize by saying, "I know these developers. I am joking with them." And everybody, my favorite thing with the internet is everybody was like, "You are Michael Scott. You're the boss who thinks you can joke with the low-level employees, and you're like somehow on the same level as them."
I was going to compare him to like Martin Shkreli, but
That would also work.
just imagine him like saying at some point like, "I enjoy stabbing baby bunnies," and then like that being quoted. And it's like, wait, that was taken out of context.
I always love these people who come out and say, "My words were taken out of context." And like, context is certainly important, right? You could take clips out of this podcast and take us completely out of context. However, some comments don't really have context.
Yeah.
And, saying, "I really love stabbing these bunnies," there aren't many contexts where that's okay.
Right.
Oh, great. Speaking of that, though, now somebody's going to, like, clip out me saying that.
I am. I'm going to put it on the soundboard so I can just hit it at any time I want.
Ryan Freels got removed from the communications department for claims about stabbing bunny rabbits.
There are some big animal lovers in this department. They are not going to put up with your crap.
Like, I was literally talking about being taken out of context.
So,
Yes. Go ahead.
I was going to say, back into context, talking about Unity, I took a class about building multimedia educational environments. And one of the things that I learned, and I signed up for it, is you can sign up for an educator account with Unity, and they'll give you all of their development tools and like thousands of dollars worth of assets for free, and you can continue to use them as long as you are an educator. I haven't used them yet, but there's a ton of tutorials on how to put stuff together, and I've done I learned how to make tutorials in this class. So for like some of my classes, eventually I'm going to use Unity to make multimedia for those classes.
That's great, and I think it speaks to that Unity is a very like diverse tool set, right? Yeah. It's not just for making games, with the Weta Digital purchase. I think a lot of the thought process has been that they may be looking like Unreal to get into the special effects world, as video game engines are becoming more powerful, and the idea of being able to make those sort of live interactive on the set and everything. Like, what is that technology called that Unreal's been doing? The sound is the stagecraft.
Right.
There's sets where it's like a 360 degree like LED screen and everything they use on The Mandalorian and that sort of thing. This is potentially scaring some developers, so we'll see how this works out and everything. But this is how engines die overnight, so hopefully not. Last bit of news here, and this was just coming out today as well. FIFA 23, the last FIFA that will be made by Electronic Arts, because they're changing the name next year to EA Sports FC Football Club. But this year they are adding women's club teams for the first time. So they're adding 2 different leagues to this. So that's pretty exciting. You're starting to see more sports games start to take women's sports seriously. Maybe not as equally serious, but, here in the U.S., our women's teams are fantastic. And so I feel like if I want to play a soccer game, and I'm going to play America, I want to be the women. I don't want to be the men. And it's sort of like if you're playing a tennis game, like you kind of want to play, you want to be Serena Williams, like she's the coolest one, and so it's kind of cool to see that happening in more sports and everything. Tennis has done that for a while, but obviously we talked about basketball with the women being on the cover of this year's game. And with FIFA, they are also putting a female athlete onto the cover of the game this year. So lots of cool stuff going on with that. All right, that does it for news. So let's talk about what you're playing. Ryan, why don't you start us off with what you've been playing?
So mainly I've just been continuing on AI, the Somnium Files 2. As far as anything like I have to add about that is, so just again for a refresher for anybody that's just hearing this the first time, AI, the Somnium Files, whether you're talking about 1 or 2, it's a it's a combination of point and click and a visual novel, and you do get to like move around in some environments. So basically you are investigating a case, and you will sometimes have to like talk to people to get information, or if you find out that they might be withholding some very important information, or there might be something they're struggling to remember, you might even be going into their dreams. And then you get to actually move around and like interact with things that are in their dreams. That's the run through for anybody that's like new to anything I'm talking about here. Go to other podcasts for more information that we've recorded. I can't say everything, but
I think it was last episode you did talk about that more in depth and everything.
Yeah.
So if people want that.
So this one has been I think it's overall the better game so far. There's things that I still think I kind of like about the first one more. I think this one struggles a little bit with having too many characters, for one, thus far. So
it's got Marvel filmitis.
yeah. So again, the case in this one is they're called the half-body. It's the half-body killer. So there's somebody who 6 years ago, within like the present time in the game, started committing murders, and you saw just half of the body of the victim there, and nobody could find the other half. 6 years later, the other halves are appearing, but the weird thing is, the weird sci-fi thing going on that nobody can explain or understands is the way that the body is registered as having just been killed a few hours ago, despite the other halves of them being found 6 years ago. So there's that mystery of do they only seem like they just got killed recently when we know that they died 6 years ago and stuff. And
ooh, I bet I know. There's people, he's throwing them through time portals, but he's closing them too quickly, which cuts them in half. And so half of them ends up in the future, 6 years, and half of them is found right now.
I'm getting closer to figuring it out. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say that is a theory that goes in the game, is that there is some because in the other game, the first game, there are multiple timelines, and they play with the fact that there's again, we're going into multiverse stuff, that there's different timelines where things happen differently. There's a theory that goes around in the game about how these murders are happening in different dimensions, and that's why. So I'm not going to say how true or not true that is, but you're kind of touching on one of the theories that's going on in the game.
I was just thinking of the game Portal, and I always thought in that game, wouldn't it be terrible if you're going through a portal and it closes on you? Wouldn't it just chop you in half?
Well, that's kind of the theory as to what maybe is happening. That's what the killer is using, maybe. But, so there's the villain, the secret organization stuff you're investigating is really interesting, how they're doing it. The game also plays with simulation theory, so that there's there's a couple of cults of people that believe that the entire world is a simulation, within somebody else's computer, or maybe that there's simulations within simulations. And so, the villainous organizations you deal with is interesting. There's also, themes regarding eugenics. One of those simulationists is also, playing with the DNA of people, because he basically thinks that the real world is just a video game, and he wants to do cool things in it. And so he takes that as license to do some terrible, evil eugenics experiments. And the villains...
The Elon Musk of the story.
Yeah, pretty much, yes. It's not too far off. But... as interesting as the overall storyline is, and I think the plot is, I think it's doing a lot of cooler things. And I might even say that some of the main characters are in theory more interesting. Some of them feel like it just feels a little overloaded, like they tried to stuff too many people into it. So for example, there's a pop culture agency within the first game, and there's a character in there that her dream is to become a major pop idol. And now there's 3 characters like that. And and like one of them is interesting, and two of them, I mean, one of them's interesting already because it's the same character, and she got developed plenty in the previous game. But you also feel like she's just kind of in this game because she was in the last game. She doesn't really serve much of an interesting purpose in this one thus far. Like, any time you spend with her could be focused on one of the other characters. And one of the characters is her main interest. The main interesting thing about her, aside from being a pop icon, is she's friends with another character that's more interesting in terms of their like character development thus far. So I feel like they could maybe have just like blended some of those characteristics into one character that was more complicated and more interesting. Because there is one of them that's very interesting thus far, but one of them's just there again because she was in the previous game, and another one's just kind of bland.
Right.
And so far, like, well, like some of the villainous characters are interesting in theory. I still don't feel like I know enough about them for them to be that interesting on their own beyond like the idea of the organization is cool. I guess like my example for this would be is like look at Iron Man 3. I thought the idea behind the villain of Iron Man 3 was really interesting. The characters themselves, they're not that bad, but they're just not quite that interesting.
Right.
That said, I'm not dissing the game. I still overall love the game. There's still interesting characters in it for sure. But I feel like it might help if you took out some of the characters and just focused on other ones a little bit more. So that's my main critique of it. The main thing that bothered me I talked about last was just how the non-binary character was talked about and treated. I haven't gotten quite any problems like that so far. Like that, I'm glad I haven't ran anything like that again. Or if I did, it wasn't near as cringy and disheartening. But I do like still that I get to play down different timelines. I do like that there's overall a tighter, more interesting plot going on. I do like the way it does build on some of the characters from the previous games. Like one character in the first game was just ridiculously powerful, and it was just kind of played up for humor. It was just like, oh, she's a 12-year-old girl that can like beat up everybody. Haha, that's kind of funny, isn't it? And this time they're actually seriously exploring like, okay, how did that happen?
Right.
Like, why can she? And it actually explores some of the sci-fi behind that. So what was kind of funny in the other game, and was a cool part of her character, but not something explored, now is something where they're seriously taking a look at in this one.
Yeah.
But overall, it's still a super enjoyable experience. And again, better storyline overall, more interesting plot, and a more interesting villain, like in terms of what's happening. Just in terms of character development, there's a lot of interesting characters, but if you cut down on some of the characters that were there, I think you could probably perfect it a little bit more by like making it less overbloated. The final thing I did want to add is something I was kind of concerned about is that there's a lot of police corruption in the first game, and they didn't really seriously address it. It looks like they kind of are a little bit in this one now, because there is a little storyline where the first character you play, the investigator from 6 years ago, does something, like he really botches something and does something really awful, and the game was taking time to address it for a little bit. It wasn't doing much, but it was doing something more than it did. It was taking time to acknowledge that what he did was a real major screw-up and was, like, something of concern.
Right.
I feel like it could have still said more, maybe, and maybe it still will. The game's not done yet. But I was happy to see that it kind of, like, acknowledged there was some consequence to, like, the police corruption and letting an officer who shouldn't be an officer, letting him still keep his job and seeing the consequences of that.
Yeah, you talking about the story not really addressing some things. It kind of reminds me of the series The Umbrella Academy, which I haven't watched the third season yet of that, but I know the second season got more into explaining some things, which I really appreciated after the first season, because the first season was like, look at this is kooky and weird, and we're not going to explain any of it, and which is fine, like, but like you can only go so long with that, right? And you go so long and it's like, okay, well, that character is just kooky and weird and there's no explanation, and that's really boring.
Yeah.
Long term. And so I know in the second season they did a better job with that, and I haven't watched the third season yet, so maybe I can't rule a verdict on that, how it does. But yeah, it really improved that show quite a bit in that regard, at least. All right, is that it, Ryan, for you for this week?
Yeah, the one other thing I did play a little bit of was what was it called again? Gunstar Heroes, I think. I played it on the Sega Genesis emulator on the Switch. It's really fun. It kind of makes me think of a bullet hell. You're just platforming around, and you're surrounded by enemies, and you have to keep shooting them, and you can pick up orbs that like change your weapon and change like what exactly it can do. Like it, at first it's just fireballs, but then you can maybe turn it into like a blowtorch, or then maybe it's like spirals, like a fire spin attack, basically. Or then maybe it's like a super long ongoing laser. The main problem with it was just that I couldn't really get past the first level, and I found out that I'm not the only person having this problem. I don't know how to actually pick up the orbs. I get lucky by doing random button presses eventually and get to pick up them. But like I've tried like specific button presses or anything, and like nothing works. And I looked it up, and I was like, and I found out I was the only person that had this problem because somebody was like commenting, "How the hell do I actually pick up anything in this game?" So it's a really cool little game. I just wish it was obvious what I had to do at some points. But
I feel like that's a Treasure game. I feel like Treasure made that, and it is a good game. I agree. All right, OJ, how about you?
All right, so I've been playing a few things. First of all, we got Portal 1 and 2. I haven't been playing it, but I've been watching my partner Kyle play it. So it's my first experience seeing the game actually being played. And it's really interesting. I'm looking forward to like getting my hands on it and playing it too. While watching it, I think it still has, even though I know what's going to happen, and I know everything from pop culture, I'm still getting a lot from the game. So I know we talked about that last time. I'm still getting a lot from it, even though I know what's going to happen. So I think it might not be exactly the same experience, but it's still a good experience.
I think that'll be especially true for Portal 2. Portal 1's the one that there's basically one twist to the game. And Portal 2 is a much more kind of varied story as you go through it.
Yeah, and I'm really, really, really enjoying it. Second is I bought, because it was only like $4, I think, Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night, the Castlevania games. So I've been replaying Symphony of the Night. I got angry because I'm so used to games auto-saving now that I keep forgetting to go back and save. And I did a very large, I played for like 2 hours without really saving.
Oh, no.
And then died and lost it all. And I beat like 2 bosses and collected a lot of stuff. So I was pretty angry. So I set that down for a little bit. I'll go back to it again. But it's really, it's weird playing it again after playing so many Metroidvanias recently because it seems a little older and clunkier than it used to be. It's not really clunky bad, like it's not unplayable at all, but it's a little clunkier and it looks a little clunkier than other games. And it's not as I was remembering it as much. It's still a great game though. I love playing it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just with newer games out, it's seeming a little dated.
I play through that game once every couple of years probably. And so I don't think I've had the same reaction because I've been back to it so often. But I do understand what you're saying. And particularly with like the save places, right? Like that seems like such an outdated concept in this day and age, like that you can't just save anywhere. And I see that potentially being confusing to people like who are playing it today for the first time.
Yeah, I really, if I wasn't used to save things, and even as I like saved in one, I was like, oh, I need to remember to be doing this, and then just didn't do it. So, and like I even ran into a room just to get it on the map and left without saving, and a couple times. So I felt real stupid after that. Third game that I'm playing is on the Oculus. It's a Doctor Who: The Edge of Time, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Because it's kind of like an escape room game, and the storyline, and this isn't a spoiler, it's right at the beginning, is that it's the Doctor and she's caught at the edge of time and she's stuck there, and
so is this Jodie Whittaker?
Yes, yes, and so she's directing you because something or someone is distorting reality, and so at the beginning, the very first thing, you're standing in a laundromat. And then it kind of like goes dark and red. And when you look in like the washing machines, there's aliens that are like in there and they're going around in a circle. And not like in a funny way. They're dangerous aliens. But then the doctor's like, hey, I'm trying to talk to you through like the TV. And it's like, those are really dangerous. You need to get out of here. Here's how you do it. Follow it this way. And then you go outside and there's Daleks and like one of their ships. So it feels like you're in the game, really. Like you're going through and trying to figure out stuff with the doctor. And she's talking to you. And she's not telling you exactly what to do. But like, oh, here's what you have to do. And then you have to figure out how to do it. And she can't always talk to you. So you have to figure out stuff by yourself. And I will say that it's been a very long time since I've been actually frightened playing a game. But watching Doctor Who, and again, this isn't a spoiler because it's not really hidden, but the angels, like I'm genuinely terrified of them. Whenever I'm watching any of the episodes with them, I like keep my one eye open at all times just because like they cause anxiety in me. And then so there's a level with them in it, and you are like so you're going up and down in an elevator, and it gets stuck, and so you have to step out, and it's like there's two really long hallways going down like both sides. So you're at a corner and you can see down both of these hallways, and you have to like wind up something for energy and then like make sure that none of the angels get to you. So you have to like make sure you're looking exactly the right way. And that's not counting when you blink, but if they just go slightly off of like where you can see, they'll come at you. And then you hear that noise that they always make in the show when the angels are moving. And it's so like I lost and I had to go back because it was really getting to me, just feeling like I was there. So I really feel immersed in the game with the angels and with everything else too. So it's really good. I haven't gotten like super far in it, but I'm really, really enjoying it.
That sounds like really clever design because those, taking an enemy from another property and bringing it into a game and making it make sense in a way that would make it scary, and with the way that you interact with the game world, that's only really possible in VR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really clever. So, like, good on them.
Yeah.
That's a clever way to translate that.
And the game is definitely worth playing. I really highly suggest getting it and playing it. And finally, it's not a...
You'll have to let Johnny play that sometime.
Oh, yeah,
Johnny
absolutely.
Gray.
Absolutely. And finally, it's not a video game, but I wanted to talk about the Netflix Resident Evil show. So I know it's gotten a lot of really bad press, but we watched it, and I really enjoyed it. And then, so I made a post saying that it felt like Resident Evil went to Euphoria High School. And I think that's one of the reasons why it got a lot of bad press is because it's really focused towards, like, Gen Z. So, like, the very first scene, when you start, it's two teenage girls. They're listening to a Billie Eilish song, and they're stereotypical Gen Z teenagers, right? And then
are they doing a TikTok at the same time?
They may have been. The TikTok is in it, like they definitely. And so it's like they're listening to a relatively dirty song, right? And it's teenage girls. It's a young black woman and a young Asian woman, and they're going through teenage life. Now, granted, it's in New Raccoon City, so it's a weird place, but again, it's very Gen Z. A lot of the what's the word I'm looking for? The lines are
dialogue.
Dialogue. That's it. Is more focused towards a different audience. And it did throw me off a little because it's not following, like it has the same characters and the same like basic premise, but it's not following the games, which I know a lot of people have a problem with. But the biggest thing that really I have a problem with that though is that I always kind of saw Albert Wesker as a white supremacist in the games. I mean, maybe not fully, but like I assumed a backstory that wasn't there of Albert Wesker being a white supremacist. I mean, it may have even been in some of the games. But anyway, Albert Wesker is black in this show, so it seems weird to me that his character is black.
Yeah, I don't remember if that's explicitly in the games. I haven't played through all the games, so I can't say. But I can certainly get that because it's the whole thing about like kind of creating a better race and everything is the goal. And so there certainly is some of that language of, eugenics and white supremacy and all that in there.
White scientists messing with genes and trying to take power.
Yeah, that always seems like it's going to be tied to supremacy in some way, even if it's not explicitly.
Did even attack Africa at one point, so...
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. And then there's a main character.
Actually wrote an essay about that.
And again, this isn't really spoilers, but a main character, the woman who's in charge of New Raccoon City, is lesbian. And I think she's a woman of color, but I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure she is. So it's a really diverse cast, a lot more diverse than most of the games. So I think that might play into why people don't like it, and the fact that it's kind of like based on Resident Evil, but not fully. And it gives a nod to a lot of things in different games in there. But I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to season 2.
I haven't started watching that yet, but I did read some people who are like, hey, this is the best thing they've ever made of Resident Evil. This is the best film or TV show that they've ever made. That's not a high bar.
Yeah, it is not. It is much better than the last movie. I can tell you that.
But I bounced off those movies.
Yeah.
I saw the original one in theaters, and then after that, I was like, oh my God, no. But yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll have to check that out. Is that it for you, OJ?
Yeah, yes.
All right. Well, I played a little bit more Match Point Tennis. I talked about this last episode. This game has a real steep learning curve that's basically like straight up, I feel like. And I've listened to a couple other people talk about trying to play it, and some of them saying they could not get over that learning curve. I did, and my big complaint now is the game's way too easy. Once I got over that learning curve, it was like, okay, I just like can place my shots wherever I want them. And like I think I've lost one game out of one set ever. And I'll lose some points here or there, but like there's no real challenge. And more the big issue with that game is, and it was released, I don't think it was a full price game anyway, and I'm playing it on Xbox Game Pass, so I didn't spend a dime on it really, not directly at least. I think the big issue with that game is it just feels like such a cheap package. I went back and I played Virtual Tennis 4 on the PC, and you know, like that game has recognizable tennis players in it. I don't know if some of the players in this game might be based on real people. They're not, you know, Roger Federer. They're not Djokovic. They're not Serena Williams. They're not people I know. And granted, I don't know a whole lot about tennis, but like my big thing is Virtua Tennis 4 does have those people. And so I was playing some of that, and I was like, hey, for a game that's like over a decade old now, like Serena Williams doesn't look too terrible in this game. The characters in Match Point Tennis look terrible. Like they don't look, you know, they're the sort of like low polygon where like, this doesn't look like a real person, or they look like so ugly. You're like, no, like professional tennis players aren't this ugly. Like what is going on with this? And so there's some fun to be had in it, but it's just like, it's gotten to the point where I just don't even want to keep playing it because I'm just bored. It's too easy. And I don't think I've even adjusted the difficulty level. So that's a pretty bad sign. If you play the career mode, you level up your stats very slowly. And again, like you can do it through collecting different tennis rackets and different tennis shoes and stuff. But like there's only like 5 of each of those or 6 of those. And I got an achievement really quick that was like, you've collected all the shoes. And I was like, I have like 5 pairs of shoes. That's it. So it just feels like a really bargain basement product at the end of the day. So it's hard to recommend it for that. I played a game called The Looker. This is available free on Steam. This is basically a parody of the game The Witness. So the game The Witness came out a couple of years back. You're basically on an island. It's from the creator of the game Braid. You're on an island and you're walking around solving puzzles, and the puzzles get more intricate and more involved. And so like they start off, you walk up to a little placard and you have to solve a puzzle on it. But then as the puzzles go along, you're having to like change your perspective and how you're looking at something and lining things up on the island and all this. The game was somewhat pretentious, let's say, in its like grander vision. The creator of those games has made some comments that make him maybe not the most likable person. And this is a parody of that game. This is a game making fun of it. And it's set up much the same way. You start off, you walk out of this room onto an island and everything, and there's all these puzzles that you have to solve. It's pretty good for a free game. I don't know that it's really that funny. It's all building up for one big payoff of a joke. And that joke is, we were talking before we went on air about Beavis and Butthead. It is a very Beavis and Butthead payoff. And I will say that it did make me laugh. But more than that, it's just the puzzles are pretty good. It's pretty fun. And for a free product, it's better than a lot of games I've seen people charging for. So if you like The Witness, or if you wanted to get into The Witness, but you thought The Witness was like way too pretentious or too difficult for you to get into, this is a much easier game to get into. It takes maybe an hour or two to play through the entire thing. But it's fun. Like, I had a lot of fun playing through it. So I would highly recommend it to anyone.
I liked Braid when I was younger. I wonder how I'd feel about it now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, bad people can make good games.
Yeah.
Right? Like, bad people make good movies. And so it doesn't necessarily make the game itself bad. I actually really liked The Witness when I played it originally. Right. I didn't care much about the story and some of the gobbledygook that is in there. There's a lot of kind of like philosophical stuff where you're like, come on. And this game does a very good job of mocking that. Like, you'll get little recordings and it's just somebody waxing philosophically, and it sounds okay for like the first 30 seconds. And then you realize that they're just speaking like inanely after a while. And like, that pays off pretty good. And so I think there's some value of playing The Witness first and then playing this, but you can play it without having ever played The Witness and you'll be fine. And it's still quite entertaining. So that's The Looker. That's available free on Steam. And I think it's completely worth your time to try out. The game I've been spending the most time with recently is Power Wash Simulator. So this has been in early access. It just came out into the full release and everything. This is exactly what it sounds like. You are power washing stuff. So you start off with like a motorcycle and you have to power wash that, and you have different nozzles and attachments you can attach to your power washer, and you have to get it completely clean. And as you are cleaning it, you're like seeing it on the screen, but then it's also like telling you, you can like, on the PC, I think it's Escape, and it'll take you to a little pop-up menu, and it says, hey, 50% of the front tire is clean. And then you can like press tab and it'll make it light up the parts that aren't clean yet. That sounds like, well, isn't it obvious what's not clean? It is most of the time, but when you get to like 99% of the engine is clean and you're like, what did I miss? What's the one little part I didn't get clean? That actually helps quite a bit. And so you start off with small things like motorcycles and golf carts, and then it progressively gets into bigger things. So you're doing like a house, and then it gets to like the nursery rhyme, the old lady who lived in the shoe. Well, they have an old lady who lives in a shoe, but it's a preschool, and she's running it as a preschool, and you have to clean the shoe, and then like they have a skate park and a mini golf course. And like the thing that makes this game kind of work for me is the environments. And the environments get progressively more complicated and larger, and they're just kind of coolly designed. It doesn't feel cheap, even though I have the impression this is a fairly small team working on this game. And it's just, you know, I use this phrase a lot, but it's a really good podcasting game. It's a great game to play while you have something on in the background and you're listening to it and you're just very much relaxing and you're cleaning stuff and you feel like you're making progress. And yes, I know I should be cleaning my house instead of fake cleaning something within this game. But you know what? This is so much easier. I just move the mouse up and down as I'm washing it. And there's a great sense of accomplishment as you get through it, and as you clean. And I think what really helps is that they break everything down to smaller parts. So if you're cleaning a house, like you get an award when you like clean a window, and then when you clean the door frame, and you always feel like you're making some progress in it. So it's just really relaxing game to play. I play it in little bits. So I'll go and play like 30 minutes, and then I'll come back later and play, maybe an hour of it or something. You get kind of tired real quick of it. It's not a game that you could like play for 4 straight hours, I don't think. It does have multiplayer, so you can have multiple people all cleaning an environment at the same time. To me, that looks really cool, and that could be like a great game to. So when I play games with my friends a lot of times online, it's, hey, let's just chat. Like instead of calling each other and chatting on the phone, let's chat while we play a game. And really the game's just something to keep us occupied while we're talking about other stuff. This seems like the perfect game for that.
Right.
So it seems like a great game to hang out with friends and everything while you play.
I will sit and watch power washing videos for a long time. So I'm going to check this out.
You would love this.
Yeah.
See,
It's so satisfying.
I'm just thinking about Steven Universe. Steven's dad owns a car wash called It's a Wash. I'm just thinking, make a Steven Universe version of this game where it just uses like an aesthetic that looks like Steven Universe's show or something.
Well, it's all very like bright and colorful. I mean, it does have a good look to it and everything. It's not quite as cartoony as that would be and everything, but there's just something very relaxing. I mean, if you're the type that gets on YouTube and watches power washing videos, those sorts of almost ASMR type videos, right? That are, I guess, ASMR for your eyes or something, where it's like there's something very like comforting about it and very like satisfying watching those. This game taps into that exceptionally well. And it's cool to watch the dirt come off as you're watching it. So like, this is not a game I would normally like praise a whole lot. I will say that I really liked, I can't think of the name of it, the home renovation game. I can't think of the exact title of that game now.
I can't remember either. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
it's a very popular one that's out right now, but it's very similar to that game, and it's very relaxed, very easy. There's not really a specific challenge to it other than that at the end of it, you feel like you have accomplished something. And so it's great. Like, even as a way to de-stress, I think it would work well for a lot of people. The other game I played, and again, I played this one because it's on Game Pass, and I was just really curious. It's called My Friend Peppa Pig, and it is the Peppa Pig cartoons. They made a game of that. And so this is a side-scrolling game. You go mostly left to right and everything, and Peppa Pig and her family are in this, and at least as far as I can tell, it's the voice actors from the cartoon who are doing the voices in this. That's pretty cool. The look of the game very much looks like the cartoon series, so that's pretty cool. I know this because I have nieces and nephews, so I know who Peppa Pig is. But what I think is not very cool is it's a terrible game. And so the only reason I'm talking about this, right, is made for little kids. It's obviously not made for me. But historically, people have made good games for young children to play. Games that feel like somebody making this game really cared about kids and everything. And so I guess I don't want to be too critical because I don't know what the thought process in making this game was. And maybe the thought process is that kids themselves are not going to play this, but mom or dad are going to control it, and the kid's going to tell them what to do. And so it's made to be very sort of interactive, but maybe sort of removed from the direct interaction. The kid's just watching it. So maybe for the child, this plays out more like a cartoon than interactive, right? But like very early on, one of the parts is you create a character and you like go over to Peppa's house and you're going to play and interact with each other. And you're in her bedroom and they're like, let's play tag. And you just run around back and forth and you're not even really tagging anyone. You're not actually playing a game of tag. And it's just like, hey, move back and forth across the room for a while, and then eventually you get to leave the room, and that's it. And so I was just thinking, while I was playing it, I was like, well, you could make a mini game of tag, right? Like this is a Mario Party style mini game, and you could actually make this like a fun game to play, this mini game. And as it is, it's just not fun. And there's no like, you're not really doing anything. And so maybe if this is for, baby's first game, right? And they're playing this and it's like all I can manage to do is move left and right on the screen, then maybe it works in that level. But, certainly when I was young, I played games, not console games didn't really have little kid games. I guess there was like Sesame Street games. There was some Cookie Monster game I had for the Atari when I was a little kid. But on the computer, on the Commodore 64 that we had, there were games aimed at kids. And when I was very young, I was playing those games. And some of those games were pretty good. And like I remember some Sesame Street games over the years that have come out that have been pretty good. And that seems like it's the same general demographic as this game. And so, even a lot of Nintendo games, right? Like the newest Kirby game could be played by some very young children.
And some of the Kirby games before that, my nephew played, and they were like you couldn't even die in them, so it was fairly chill.
Yeah, like was it Star Ride on the GameCube, where it's like basically you use the controller and the one button, the big giant red A button on the GameCube controller. So like this feels. It feels like it's not a full product. It feels like it should have those little mini games, because I could see like you play through the story and then you can go back and play these little tiny mini games at any point. And I could see a little kid, even if those mini games are just Mario Party style, kind of overly simplistic mini games, little kids still getting into that. Yeah. And this not having that, and like the hint at the beginning of the game is at the end, we're going to go to the big amusement park. And I was like, oh, come on. We're going to go to an amusement park and you're not going to have any of these style of mini games in it. Like, and maybe it does later, but I'm probably never going to get that far in the game. But I was interested, so I did test it out. And I think there are better games to play with your children if that's what you're looking for. All right. So the big question this week was, what is your favorite Super Nintendo game? So OJ, we'll start with you.
Y'all probably know what this is going to be. I'm going to say Final Fantasy 6/3 or 3/6. It's the.
That sounds like a Kingdom Hearts game. 6/3.
It's the storyline is just incredible. The characters are incredible. The gameplay is incredible. I already loved Final Fantasy, but it solidified my love of Final Fantasy. It's by far my favorite SNES game.
I can second that one, and that is my favorite Final Fantasy game is 6. I know a lot of people prefer 4. I love 4 as well, but 6 is just the complete package.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the best role-playing games ever made. So, Ryan, how about you?
Okay, so my first console was a Nintendo 64, so I haven't played that much Super Nintendo stuff. I've gone back and played some stuff. I've never finished a game, though, if I'm being honest, on Super Nintendo. But of the ones I played some of and I want to go back to and finish the most, I'd probably say Earthbound. Because I really love like the aesthetic of Earthbound. I really love seeing Japan's version of like a fantasy American setting. I just think it's a lot of fun. I love like the art, the aesthetic. It was funny. And some of the story stuff that was going on was like really interesting. Like there was like, I can't remember. There was some group that wanted to make the entire world blue or see the entire world as blue or something, if I remember correctly. And there was like also like a scene where you like Ness has to fight the police. So like it was just a very fun, beautiful, creative game. I don't remember enough of it to say too much beyond that, but I just remember I had a really good time with what I played of it, and I'd like to go back and like finish it. Yeah,
that's a game I've never finished, but I've played several times and really liked quite a bit.
OJ sad.
You need to play that game. It's rough on an emulator though, because every time I ever found it on an emulator, it would screw up at a specific part, no matter which emulator I was using, or which ROM. But there was one part that just always got it screwed up.
Well, that game has like anti-piracy built into it.
Yep.
So that might be the reason why you were having trouble with it.
Probably. But also, when you bought it, it had scratch and sniff stuff, so you could smell like the bosses.
Just what I always wanted.
Right. So that's a very close second, actually, to me, Earthbound. Yeah, and also it was the first game where I got to name. You got to name what you used, and I made my my psionic power like Dick or something. So it was like you use Psy-Dick, and so
Close relative of Psyduck.
yeah.
Game Freak decided to cut that character out like at the last minute. It's like, maybe not.
It's probably a wise choice on their part. So I have said before, even on this podcast, that my favorite video game of all time, when I'm pushed and asked to answer that, is Super Mario World. So that's a Super Nintendo game. I've talked about that before, so I'm going to choose something different. This may actually be, I think Super Mario World is the best game ever made. I actually maybe prefer Super Metroid. I love Super Metroid quite a bit, and like both the games that you have mentioned, I think are fantastic games. At least what I've played of Earthbound, and I've played through Final Fantasy VI multiple times. But Super Metroid's just such a fantastic game, and having played the original Metroid, it felt like such a huge leap forward when I played it the first time. And there's so many like hidden things, like things like saving the animals at the end of the game, things that like I didn't even know about for years after playing that game. I didn't know you could do those. And, you know, just like the first time you get into one of the glass corridors and you realize, oh, I can actually like crack this and break it open, and this is how I access a different part of the world and everything. It just, like so many Super Nintendo games, it felt like you were going on such a full grand adventure, right? Like, like Mario World compared to the original Super Mario Brothers, it feels like a huge grand adventure. It feels like something you would have seen in The Never-Ending Story or read in a book, like The Never-Ending Story. But it felt like for the first time, video games were really taking you on that sort of adventure. And Super Metroid does that. And of course, you know, it became the basis for really Super Metroid more than the original Metroid, became the basis for one of my favorite game genres. You know, of course, it's directly related to giving us Symphony of the Night and so many of the Metroidvanias that we play today. So I really think a lot of that game, and it's the sort of game I can go back every few years and play through and enjoy it still just as much today as I did back then. All right, that does it for this week's show. Thank you, Ryan and OJ, for joining me. For those listening, you can find this podcast wherever you get podcasts, on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever. You can email us by emailing me at justin.young@siu.edu. And as we talked about, Alicia should be back very soon, we hope. And she will rejoin us and everything. We'll have a new episode. We are getting to the end of summer and the beginning of the school year, so we don't know exactly how the schedule will go over the next couple of weeks. So we may not have an episode exactly at 2 weeks, depending on how things work out and everything, but we'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.